I'm Brian Holt. I shipped Reddit's first React code, and I'm currently a staff product manager at Neon. I created this course because understanding React server components and performance optimizations are critical to modern React development. In this course, we'll cover React 19 and Next.js, different rendering modes, building with React server components, performance optimizations, advanced React transitions, optimistic UI updates, managing expensive renders, and together we'll build practical projects. Become your company's React expert with this course. So we've talked about client-side components, we talked about SSG, we talked about SSR, but now we're going to talk about React server components, which are relatively new concepts. It's probably why most of you are interested in taking this course. It's like the most interesting new thing about this course. Let's just dwell a second on this statement right here, because I think it's surprising to some people. It was surprising to me. I heard about RSCs the first time I was at NextConf forever ago. And I was like, oh, they're like redoing server-side rendering. Interesting, right? And once I got more and more into that, I realized that like they're actually entirely different concepts. You can do RSCs with SSR. You can do them. You can do one. You can not do the other. You can do both, and you can do neither. So, which is to say, they don't really have too much to do with each other. The key is with server-side rendering, you do the initial page load. You send that down to the user, and then everything gets taken over by client-side rendering. That's SSR, right? React server components are just components that only ever render on the server. So it's actually like an ongoing relationship between the server and the app. Whereas SSR, once it does its initial render, it's just done. It's no longer involved in the equation. Client-side React takes over at that point. So SSR only speeds up that first page load. That's full stop. That's all it does ever. All it'll ever do. RSCs are like much more opinionated, much more integrated with your server. It's why you need something like Next.js, because it just won't work on like a Fastify server. The coolest part about this is like it makes a lot of these things where like you had to like make an API route and a client-side app route together to like accomplish like one task. Like a good example of like I have a form that takes in 15 things from the user and then it saves it to the database. How would you do that right now with a client-side React app? Well, okay, I get my form component, and then on submit, I submit to an API endpoint. The endpoint validates everything, saves it to the database, responds back, hey, everything's okay. With RSCs, this becomes just incredibly simple. You just do like, we'll do server actions here in just a second, and it's all one step, right? You cut out like the entire, I have to write an API endpoint. Your React app basically takes care of generating micro API endpoints for you because it's all one thing, it's all one context to it. So that kind of code gets just wildly simplified by RSCs. It's actually very, very cool. Like I really do enjoy that part of it. What happens? I need to like load server data into a client component. This is it. You just have a server component on top, and then you just do everything you need to in the client, in the parent server component, and then you just pass it all into the client component. Because props work, right? We can pass all the props down. That all works totally fine. And now we just need to make this client page .js, and we'll also need to do a fetch notes .js page. So let's go do fetch notes first. That's quick to do. So this happens all on the server, right? Fetch notes. So we're going to use server. And we're going to say import async database from promised at SQLite 3. And we're going to say export default async function fetch notes. And I'm going to do it since, because basically you only want to grab things from a certain ID backwards. And again, this is all database stuff, so you don't really have to be super concerned with it. Const db equals await async database.open /notes.db. Let rows if since rows is going to be equal to await db.all select. How long is this? Yeah, again, this is going to be a quote. n.id as id, n.note. Feel free to copy this. You definitely don't need to go through this as well if you don't want to. Yeah, then since, right? So this will be an ID, and it'll just give me everything newer than that ID. Otherwise, you're going to say else. Rows is assigned essentially the same thing. You can even go as far to copy most of this. We're just going to drop the where, essentially. And this isn't going to have anything in it. Okay, and return rows. So client page, first thing, this is a client component, right? So first thing we're going to put in here is use client. And then we're going to import use state, use effect. I mean, 99.99% of the time, you want it to be a client component if you need to use useState. Default function teacher client page, and this is going to take in fetch notes and initial notes. Okay, const notes set notes equals use state. And if you have initial notes, then use that. You might not for whatever reason. And if you don't, then just use empty array, right? Okay, and then from there, we're going to do a use effect, and we're going to, because we want this to be polling, right? Then we're going to use an effect to poll that endpoint. So const interval equals set interval. Set interval. Async function here. And then say let since if notes.length is greater than 0, then since is assigned notes.length -1 .id or null. This is called nullish coalescing, if that's not something that's familiar to you. That basically says, like, if this exists, then it's an ID. If nothing exists there, then it is null. That's a relatively recent, I don't know. I can't keep track of time anymore. When you have a 3-year-old, time just kind of all meshes together. It feels recent to me. I'm going to put it that way. Const new notes equals await fetch notes with since. So this will either be the ID of the last thing that it saw, or it's going to be null. And then you'll set notes, and then you'll just it'll be a concatenation of ... notes and ... new notes. This is the same thing as saying like notes.concat new notes, same diff. And then we want this to go however much you want to. I'm just going to say 5,000 milliseconds. So every 5 seconds this will poll. And I don't want this to run again, so I'm just going to give this an empty array. So it's going to set up the interval, and then this effect will keep going after that. Okay, and now we're just going to say return, and just do a little bit of markup here. Div h1 teachers view, and we're going to do a ul, and we're going to do notes.map note, and we're going to return here an li with the key equal to note.id, and it's going to be a field set. h2 from note.fromUser, and to note.toUser. Okay, that's the h2, and then we're going to do a p here with the note.note. I think that's it. So should we check? So note passer. So now we have our secret feed here. We can see down here at the bottom that that's the last one I sent down there. So let's just create a second one here so we can see it working from the poll perspective. So I'm going to say localhost, what is this, 3000? Write a note, and we'll write one from Sarah to Brian, say, I think you smell. So if I click save, you can see there, shows up pretty fast. It's pretty cool, right? So let's refactor to use Optimistic. We're also going to use transition again. So at the top here, we're going to import use Optimistic, and we're going to say use transition. Okay. We're going to do a, up here at the top, we're going to say const is pending and start transition again equals use transition. And then underneath this one, we're going to say const optimistic thoughts and add optimistic thought are going to be equal to use optimistic. And then the first thing is we're going to give it thoughts, because that's the one that it's going to populate itself off of. Then we're going to give it an update function. So we're going to say old thoughts, new thought. Okay, and then you're going to say new thought, comma, dot, 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 old thoughts. You could even do something like, I have this in reverse order. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so now I have this optimistic thoughts array, which is basically just going to be thoughts most of the time, except that when I call this add optimistic thought, these two are going to differ a little bit. And then once they're reconciled, then they'll be the same thing again. So inside of post deep thought, we're going to come down here to set thoughts. So I'm going to say down here, start transition. So this does, you might be wondering, it's like, do I have to put this in a transition? And I believe the answer is yes. Because you have to mark this as being like a low priority re-render. And so this all just works inside of transitions. Oh, I have this entire thing marked as one. Is that really what I want to do? Yeah, I mean, I guess let's just follow my notes here. So I think you could actually just mark it at the end, but we're just going to do the whole thing inside of a transition. Make sure this is async. It is. That's totally fine. Cool. That all sounds good. And then inside of this, yeah, we're going to do up here as well. Very first thing, we're going to say add optimistic thought. And then I'm going to, you could just put directly the thought in there, but I'm going to do this. $sign this, and I'm going to say thought. And then I'm just going to put like a loading here. So then the user knows this hasn't really been sent. I'm showing you that it's been sent, but it actually hasn't been sent yet. And then once this actually like set thoughts, new thoughts gets called down here, this will implicitly drop this, right? Because whatever comes back from the API is going to include just the normal value in there. Okay, So close here, the last thing that we need to do here is instead of mapping over thoughts, we're going to map over optimistic thoughts. So now what do we expect? I'm going to type in here some real deep thoughts. I'm going to call this, and then notice it shows it right away, which is really cool. And it shows this loading indicator as well. And then once it actually hits the API, it's going to say some real deep thoughts, right? So it actually drops the loading. This feels snappy, right? This feels really good. I don't know. It feels good to me. Let's, for funsies, I'm going to turn this up to like 90% error rate so you see what it looks like when you don't do it. So if I say LOL here, this thought was not deep enough, do better. It just drops it, right? Because it sees that like this, nothing actually got added to this. And so once that transition ends and nothing's been added to it, it's just going to go back to the original state. So I don't have to write any additional machinery. It just goes back to the original state that we started at the beginning of the transition.